so we should be happy about that. And of course, his main concern is health care for everyone. So here I give you Josh McCall.
Thank you, Memory. I've been making a special effort this week. I know that our president, with an asterisk beside his name, recently referred to a black woman as a dog. He has referred to the press as the enemy of the people, and he is constantly degrading those who are his enemies, those who criticize him, and yet at the same time, he and his puppets in Congress demand that we respect the president. And I thought about that, and you know, they're right. So today, I've made the decision I will no longer call him Sun-Kissed Caligula. President Sun-Kissed Caligula in the future. I never drive up to Raven County without thinking about my uncle, Troy Marcingill, who grew up in Raven County, back before it was a wealthier area, back before it was a tourist destination. His mother and his father were very hard-working people. His father worked in a sawmill. A lot of people around here used to work in sawmills. And he taught me how to trout fish in Raven County. And I can always remember how to get there to the place where he taught me to trout fish. It's where Big Creek and Moccasin Creek flow into one big river. And I always remember the road to turn on is War Woman Road, because no other place in the entire country will you find a road named War Woman Road. So I have very fond memories of Raven County. My uncle, by the way, Troy Marcingill, is on Medicare right now. And like a lot of other Medicare recipients, he has a hard time affording his medication every month. He has diabetes, like a lot of other people in my family, and he finds himself in a donut hole. And one of the main reasons I'm running is to make sure that no senior on Medicare ever finds themselves in that donut hole. If you're like me, you've spent a lot of time over the past year wondering just how in the world did we get to where we are right now. And I couldn't help but think of the beautiful sights that I used to see when I would go with my uncle. One of my favorite parts of the fishing trips was always looking at the scenery. And I was just, again, surprised looking out the porch here at how beautiful it is up here. And when we would go and hike an hour and 50 minutes into the first fishing hole, I would often notice that the landscape looked drastically different just from the last time I went fishing with my uncle. And that's because the rains and the floods often just change the landscape so drastically. It uproots trees, it washes away entire hills. And we've seen a lot of that kind of destructive force actually over the past year in our nation. But these aren't the waves of a flood, these aren't natural disasters, these are the waves of history. And unfortunately right now in our country, the forces shaping these waves of history are the forces of injustice. I feel often when I wake up in the morning like Robinson Crusoe, stranded on a strange land. And sometimes I feel like I'm all alone. Until, that is, I go knocking on doors. Now, many of you have felt this strangeness, this vertigo of being in a weird place where the president, they have apparently just given him his phone full time now, just tweets whatever is on his mind at the time. But there are more people out there like you than you think. But I'm preparing for a different kind of wave in 2018, a blue wave.
Yes.
A wave that will shape history differently, because if injustice can shape this world the way it has shaped it, if injustice can shape this world, then the forces of justice can react and oppose those forces just as powerfully. Our president, Sun-Kissed Caligula, has declared the press the enemy of the people. And after he has declared them the enemy of the people, we have seen in Annapolis an actual slaughter at a press room of newspapers. And the other day, when he was upset at the press standing up to him, he tweeted about the Boston Globe. Within seconds of his tweet, the Boston Globe received bomb threats. He has declared the press the enemy of the people because it hurts the only thing that matters to him, which is his ego. But I'm here today to declare the real enemy of the people. The enemy of the American people does not wear a human face. I believe the greatest danger facing the American people today is our broken, corrupt medical system, where people are having to choose between livelihood and life. There is a candidate named Don Johnson whose husband has cancer, and he still has to work while suffering through cancer because in our broken system, when you wake up with cancer one day, you also realize you have to go to work, otherwise you will lose everything you own because you're sick. The enemy of the people is a situation where the poor people die simply because they're poor, and other people become poor because they're dying. That is the real enemy of the people. Injustice is the enemy of the people. Number 2, poverty is the enemy of the people. Poverty in a land of wealth. Jeff Bezos and the people over at Apple are building multiple homes. How many homes do you need? How many pair of designer pants can you wear? But the people making them wealthy are having to scrimp and save and work multiple jobs. The enemy of the people is poverty in the midst of a sea of wealth. The 2 Americas that Martin Luther King Jr. described so long ago are still with us. Because I'm canvassing across the 9th District. And I go into neighborhoods who live a different reality from me. I go into neighborhoods of color where their parents have to give their sons a different talk than what I have to talk to my children about. That's the enemy of the people. The enemy of the people is prejudice. The prejudice that causes some law enforcement to look at African American men as guilty before they've even been tried. That is the enemy of the people. The enemy of the people is the prejudice, and the fear that the Republican Party has preyed on for decades now against immigrants. And that enemy of the people has donned a new uniform, ICE. Just yesterday, a man was driving his wife to the hospital because she was going through labor. She was destined to get a C-section, and they knew she was going to have to get a C-section. He was driving her to the hospital. They made a stop at a gas station to get gas, and ICE seized that man away from his family in the middle of doing something that many of us have done, but we've never thought about the danger of being picked up by an officer not even wearing a uniform. And that woman had to drive herself to the hospital in labor to get her C-section without the father of her child. That kind of prejudice and hatred and injustice is the real enemy of the people. I don't care what uniform it wears.
Gestapo!
I spoke to a young woman last night at Best Buy, and I was checking out something for my daughter, and told her, you know, you're almost off work, so it's almost over. It's 9 o'clock, she's been working all day, she looked tired. She said, well, it is almost over, but I actually have to wake up at 4 in the morning because I have a second job. I have to work 2 jobs. And I said, you should vote McCall for All in 2018. Because I believe in this old-fashioned idea, 8 hours work, 8 hours recreation, and 8 hours rest. It sounds radical, but once when FDR swept through the state and won it handily, he ran on just such a bold progressive message that respected hard work. The enemy of the people is the treadmill of poverty that people have to live through day in and day out, hoping and praying that some emergency doesn't happen, that one of their kids doesn't get sick, that their husband doesn't get picked up by ICE on the way home. That is the enemy of the people. And finally, the enemy of the people. The enemy of the people is ignorance. Not knowing that immigration helps this country. Not knowing enough not to be afraid of immigrants. You see, my wife came here, actually she was born here, but her family came here on a boat from Vietnam. Her father one night didn't show up at his home, and my mother-in-law was worried to death. Back in Vietnam, he had trained as a helicopter pilot to fight on the side of the U.S. forces. And one night he didn't return home and she was terrified. Anything could have happened to him. And she went out looking for him in town and found out that the re-education forces, the police of the communists, had picked him up and put him in a re-education camp. And he stayed there for a while, and as soon as he got out, they knew they had to make it out of that country any way they could. So they took my brother-in-law and my sister-in-law, got on a boat, and with the true American spirit, a truer American spirit that has ever been inside of Donald Trump or Paul Ryan, they made their way to this shore, the land of liberty and opportunity. And I've been so proud. My mother-in-law has recently retired after working for decades, being a seamstress, one of the hardest working people I've ever met. And she's finally retired. She said she feels guilty because she's so used to waking up early and going to work. And she is finally retired. That is the true American spirit. And those children sitting in cages, over 500 of them, that is today where the American spirit is sitting, caged up because of the enemy of the people that has taken control of this godless, spineless Republican Party in power right now. And I pledge that when I get to Congress, I'm going to empty those cages of kids, and I'm going to fill them with the monsters who put them there.
Yeah.
That's why I'm running. I don't wake up every day and think about Donald Trump. Donald Trump wakes up every day and thinks about Donald Trump. And most of the people I knock on doors with are not thinking about Trump versus Hillary versus Bernie. They've moved on. That's tabloid politics. Talk to your neighbors about the issues. First and foremost on everybody's mind is healthcare. Healthcare. I don't think anybody should die because they're poor. And I think nobody should be poor because they're dying. I believe healthcare is a right every much as freedom of speech, and I pledge to fight for that right for every single American. Help me get there. Please come by my table. I have yard signs, I have t-shirts and bumper stickers, and I would love for you to purchase some of my swag and take it to your community and let everybody see that you are proud to vote for a Democrat with a positive message. God bless and have a great night.